The pounding on the gate echoed like thunder through the quiet morning. James looked up from his coffee, already knowing who it was. The HOA president, Karen, stood outside with a clipboard clutched against her chest, her voice sharp as glass. "Unlock this gate immediately. This is community property." She barked, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear, but James didn't move. He simply leaned against the wooden post and watched her, calm and steady. He knew something she didn't. Something that would change everything about this battle. The community had always whispered about Karen's relentless control, how she fined neighbors for their grass being 2 inches too tall or their porch lights left on past midnight. But James had never been one to bend easily. His land had been in his family for decades, long before the HOA even existed. The gate wasn't just wood and steel, it was a line drawn in history. Karen pounded again, threatening fines, lawsuits, and police involvement. "You can't lock up a road people depend on. Open it now, or you'll regret it." James gave her a faint smile, sipping his coffee like he had all the time in the world. He didn't unlock the gate. He didn't argue. Instead, he whispered to himself, "Let her push harder. The truth will break her soon." What Karen didn't know, what nobody in the neighborhood knew, was that James wasn't just protecting his cabin. He was protecting the one secret that gave him more power than the HOA could ever imagine. And it all started with a single piece of paper he had tucked away in a safe inside his cabin. By the following week, Karen had escalated her campaign. Flyers appeared on neighbors' doors accusing James of holding the community hostage. HOA board meetings filled with angry voices, demanding action. Some neighbors looked at James with sympathy, but most avoided eye contact. Terrified of crossing Karen, she marched back to the gate with 2 uniformed officers trailing her. "This is your last warning," she said triumphantly, waving a stack of papers. "You're in violation of HOA bylaws. Unlock it now." The officers, clearly uncomfortable, turned to James. "Sir, is there a reason you're keeping this closed?" James calmly retrieved a folder from his truck. His hands didn't shake. His eyes didn't waver. "Yes," he said evenly. "Because this isn't their road to control." Karen laughed, her shrill voice cutting through the air. "That's ridiculous. This is a shared community road." James flipped the folder open, showing the officers an official deed. "Not anymore. It hasn't been for years. I own this road. Every inch of it." For the first time, Karen faltered. Her voice caught in her throat as she leaned forward, trying to read the document. The officers exchanged glances, unsure what to say. James locked eyes with Karen and added, "So if you want this gate open, you'll have to do more than shout HOA bylaws at me." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Karen turned pale, but she wasn't finished yet, not even close. Karen regrouped quickly. If she couldn't win with threats, she'd try humiliation. Soon, HOA newsletters labeled James a bully and claimed he was extorting the neighborhood. Rumors spread that he was planning to charge tolls just to drive past his gate. Neighbors whispered behind his back, children pointed when he drove by, and yet James stayed silent. He let the storm rage around him. Because deep down, he knew the truth would roar louder than Karen's lies. A week later, HOA trucks rumbled toward his gate. Workers carried bolt cutters and crowbars, ready to dismantle it piece by piece. Karen strode ahead like a queen leading her army. "Tear it down," she ordered, but as the first worker raised his cutter, James appeared from the cabin, holding up his phone. "Before you do that, maybe you should hear what the county judge had to say." He pressed play on a voicemail. The deep voice of the judge filled the air. "Mr. James, your deed and ownership have been verified. That road is private property. Anyone attempting to damage it can be held liable for trespassing and property destruction." The workers froze. One by one, they lowered their tools. Karen's face turned crimson. She screeched, "Don't listen to him. He's bluffing." But nobody moved. The weight of the judge's words was undeniable. Karen stormed away, heels stabbing into the gravel. James exhaled, his grip tightening around his phone. He knew this wasn't over, because people like Karen didn't walk away, they came back louder. Karen launched her final offensive. She called for an emergency HOA meeting, dragging nearly every resident into the community center. With dramatic flair, she presented charts, photos, and twisted arguments about how James was endangering the neighborhood. "We cannot allow one man to lock us away from our own homes," she cried. "We have rights too." The crowd clapped, some hesitant, others fully convinced. It looked like Karen had regained control, but James had been waiting for this moment. He walked into the meeting late, carrying a thick binder under his arm. The room fell silent as he laid it on the table with a heavy thud. Inside were not just the deeds proving ownership of the road, but also old county records, maps, and letters from previous landowners, all confirming that the HOA had no claim, no control, and no authority over the access. "Every one of you has been driving on land that belongs to me," James said firmly. "I never charged you. I never stopped you. But when the HOA tried to force me, I had no choice but to defend my rights." The room buzzed with shock. Some neighbors looked guilty, realizing they had sided with Karen too quickly. Others exchanged nervous glances, wondering what this meant for their daily lives. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to interrupt, but James raised a hand. "I don't want to be your enemy. But I won't let anyone, especially the HOA, dictate what happens on my land." Karen's power slipped like sand through her fingers. But James wasn't done tightening his grip. Days turned into weeks, and the HOA's influence shrank. Neighbors who once feared Karen started avoiding her. Some even approached James quietly, thanking him for standing up, but Karen wasn't finished. She filed a lawsuit, claiming the road was a community easement. Her lawyers tried every trick, twisting language and citing outdated bylaws. James sat in the courtroom, calm but determined. His lawyer presented the deed, county maps, and testimony from historians. The judge reviewed it all, then delivered the final blow. "This court finds that the property in question, specifically the road leading to the cabin, belongs solely to Mr. James. The HOA has no jurisdiction." The gavel's strike echoed like thunder. Karen gasped, her face pale as defeat washed over her. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around James, asking how it felt to win. He simply said, "This was never about power. It was about standing up for what's right." But deep down, he had already made his decision. Winning in court wasn't enough. He needed to ensure the HOA could never try this again, and the only way to do that was to take control of everything. Behind the scenes, James had been negotiating. Quietly, strategically, he bought up small parcels of land that connected to the road. Piece by piece, unnoticed, he expanded his control, and then came the shock. At the next HOA gathering, James walked in with a smile and dropped a single document on the table. "I now own the road. And every connecting parcel leading in and out of this neighborhood," he said calmly. "Which means I control all access." Gasps filled the room. Karen nearly fainted, clutching her chair for balance. You can't do that," she sputtered. James looked her straight in the eye. "I already did." The neighbors shifted uneasily. Some looked fearful. Others relieved. They realized the HOA's reign of control had ended. Karen was powerless. James folded his arms. "From now on, this gate stays closed. The road is mine, the choice is mine, and no one can take that away." Karen's face crumpled. The very woman who once barked orders now had no ground to stand on, but James wasn't cruel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "All I ever wanted was respect for my land. Remember that." The war was over. Or so it seemed. Weeks later, the gate stood tall, a silent symbol of victory. Karen no longer stormed around with clipboards, and the HOA operated in whispers instead of commands. The neighborhood had changed. James often stood by the gate, watching cars slow down as drivers remembered who owned the road beneath their tires. Some neighbors waved nervously, others avoided eye contact. But James didn't mind. He hadn't fought for popularity, he had fought for freedom. One afternoon, Karen approached quietly, no clipboard in hand, no anger in her voice. "You won," she admitted softly. "The HOA can't touch you. You own everything." James gave her a steady look. "I never wanted a war, Karen. I only wanted peace." She nodded slowly, defeated. And for the first time, James saw something other than arrogance in her eyes: acceptance. That night, he closed the gate for the last time. The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed like a final chapter being written. He walked back to his cabin, the sunset painting the sky in gold. He wasn't just the man who owned the road, he was the man who taught an entire neighborhood that real strength isn't about control. It's about standing firm, even when everyone else doubts you. The HOA had ordered him to unlock his gate. Instead, he closed it forever, and in that silence, James finally felt free, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.